My name is Becky Lipton with Becky Lipton Research and Consulting, and I wrote one of the sustainability papers on food security. It's called Food Security for Edmonton. Is it really something we should care about? Is that all people at all times have access to enough adequate food. But food security has really become a lot more than that recently. And we've realized that in order to get access to food and talk about having enough, we have to talk about where that food's coming from and make sure that it's from a sustainable food system in a way that will make sure that we will always have that access to food, especially within the global context. And so in this paper what I did is I looked at some of the things that would be the threats or the risks and why we should be thinking about food security. So things like talking about food miles, how far our food travels to get to our plate, things like energy, and talking about things like peak oil and whether that's something we should be concerned about in terms of food and what the relationship is between food and oil. Over a year ago, we saw food prices hit the roof around the world. We saw riots happening in many places, and here in Canada we also saw food prices rise. It wasn't as drastic as it was in some places, but the cost of bread went up something like 37%. So it's really quite significant, and we had very little control over what was happening to our food at that point. What caused those things to happen. And so we go through some of those details and how that affects our food here and whether we should be thinking about it or not. And then I talk about what makes Edmonton unique. So things like the fact that we export a lot of our agricultural products within the province. We have very low food costs, but we have high externalities, which are things like extra costs, the costs on our health care, costs on the environment, and so on, of our food system. And then also looking at people within Edmonton who go hungry, and how does that fit into the whole picture. And then kind of shifting to looking at what would a local food economy and working for food security mean. And then things like the fact that we have an amazing soils here in the province and in the city of Edmonton itself, and our great microclimate, the resources that we have in our farmers, and so on. And then just talking about, so with all of these risks, what should we really be thinking about? How much does that factor in? I put a little bit of my opinion in there, how I think things are going to go into the future. Look a little bit at some of what people are saying in terms of counter arguments, and then finally how I think that we can build a strategy that will move towards a positive, a healthy, and a vibrant Edmonton based on the food security. So right now I currently do industry development program coordination work, so communications and things like that. I'm also working with the Organic Association, Organic Alberta. I'm the interim executive director for the association, work with the farmers markets across the province and things like that. So how I got interested in it all is when I was doing my undergrad, I started getting interested in international food politics and delving into all of those issues. And then that took me to working on farms. I worked on organic farms and sort of in alternative agriculture for a number of years, about 5 years. And then I went back, did my master's degree looking at women in agriculture. I worked for a rural research group for a number of years. And then I got into some agriculture and environmental education work. And finally that's brought me back here to Alberta, where I've been for the last several years, and doing this work as a consultant.